In the latest Bloomberg Business Week, Max Abelson and Jeanna Smialek report on how the nationwide opioid crisis is affecting even the affluent on Wall Street. It tells the story of a Lazard trader who became addicted, got clean, and then opened a luxury facility in Darien, Connecticut for others with his problem. We don't have statistics specifically for those in financial markets, but deaths from opioid overdoses went up 25% in New York and 31% in Connecticut, while they were growing 16% nationwide. Here with more on their reporting is Max Abelson and Jeanna Smialek. So, Max, I'll start with you. This is quite a story of this man who was a successful trader for Lazard, and he was running out during the day to try to score more hits for his opioids.
Yeah, I mean, Trey Laird had a life that looks like a lot of my sources on Wall Street. I mean, everything was, you know, from the outside terrific. He lived in Connecticut in a fancy bedroom community, and he was a trader, a successful one. People really liked him. I talked to people who knew him when he was at like the height of his addiction. But he was, you know, at his height using 160 milligrams of Oct.19 every day, and you're supposed to start with 10 milligrams to give you a sense of what that use means. But the reality is, Trey's story isn't out of the ordinary. Jeanna and I spent time speaking with people who are on trading floors and in banks, working in private equity, who are getting addicted to opioids like Oxycontin. And, you know, obviously it's been hard to ignore the really upsetting story of addiction, you know, plowing through rural America, but it certainly has come to Wall Street, and that's what our story in Business Week is about.
Well, that is one of the striking things, because we tend, in our ignorance, to think, oh, this is something in West Virginia or Ohio or my home state of Michigan, and yet it's right here on Wall Street. How do people become addicted initially? Is it because they actually buy illegal drugs, or did they have some medical procedure that gets prescribed?
So when we were talking to doctors and recovery center officials, what they would tell us pretty consistently is when you look at this problem on Wall Street, it's generally coming from prescriptions. So it's either people taking prescription pills to come down off of a high from something else, like cocaine or some other stimulant, or it's people taking this stuff because they had a sports injury or some other sort of injury, and then they just get addicted and they can't get off of it.
Is there any way to get our arms, Jeanna, around how big a problem it is?
So it's hard to tell specifically how big of a problem it is on Wall Street, just because we don't break out these data to individual jobs. But what we know is that it's becoming an increasingly large problem in New York City and generally throughout the Northeast. You know, this is a problem, like you said, that really hit home in the Rust Belt a while ago, but has just been spreading up and northward, I think.
Yeah, it's across the country, and actually we've even had the Fed chair, Janet Yellen, testimony talk about the effect perhaps on the workforce. What she said is, I don't know if it's causal or symptomatic of long-running economic maladies that have affected these communities and particularly affected workers who have seen their job opportunities decline. She suggested, Max, actually, that it may be affecting job participation rates.
Listen, you know, this is, first of all, an extraordinary time for journalism in general right now, I think, in 2017. But in particular, the reporting on the opioid epidemic has been, you know, I'm a journalist, but I find myself moved and envious by other reporters' stories. And it was partially because of Jeanna's reporting on the impact of opioids on the workforce in the United States that I thought to myself, you know, because as you know, I write about Wall Street culture. My thought was, you know, maybe this is here. And editors asked us to look into it. And, you know, I found, you know, normally I really like reporting and it's a fun process. Right. This was a pretty upsetting process. You know, for example, Todd Hollander, a gentleman who's in this story, you know, he talks about being on the American Stock Exchange, and someone was just like, here, have a, what was it? It was Percocet or Vicodin, and pretty, you know, people's bodies, I think, are wired differently. The reality is, we don't know that much about addiction, and sometimes people react differently.